Welcome, fellow comic fans, to Wednesday Warriors, the show where I go over the weekly comic solicitations and pick out some of my favorites from the week. I'm your host, as always, Alex, and we've got ourselves a bit more to talk about this week than the last. As you remember, last week was a bit lean on the picks, so I actually found double the amount of picks from last week, and should make for an interesting show. So we will get started with DC this time and not an independent. And what we've got from DC first is the New Teen Titans Volume 7 trade paperback. This is one to just kind of draw attention to the fact that DC's still putting out trades from the Marv Wolfman and George Perez run, which is what pretty much every comic fan calls a classic run from the 80s. I haven't personally read it as of yet, but what I felt was of note here is that this is the first trade where Dick Grayson becomes Nightwing and gets rid of the Robin persona, and looks like it is where the classic Judas Contract storyline takes place. Interesting in that it took up to Volume 7 before Dick Grayson became Nightwing. Goes to show how much I know about Teen Titans, really. It's kind of one of the soft spots in my comic reading resume, so at some point I'll get around to it. The official issue numbers that it collects would be issues 42 through 48, with the Teen Titans Annual number 3 as well in there. It is retailing for $19.99, and that is a really good deal on DC's part again. If you're a fan of Teen Titans, it's worth checking out. I'm sure Volume 1 is still in print if you'd like to start from the beginning. Another DC book to talk about is Wonder Woman Volume 3 from the Rebirth line, written by Greg Rucka with art by Liam Sharp. Now, this one, I'm not going to be as aware of what's going on with it. I have not started the second run of Greg Rucka's Wonder Woman along with Liam Sharp and Nicola Scott. I've heard amazing things, and I know I'm going to love it, but I just have not gotten around to picking up the trade for that yet. This one does kind of, I guess, reveal the order they go about it, because the way they collect the trades is kind of interesting. This one is collecting the odd numbers of 13, 15, 17, 19, 21, 23, and 25. Now, I'm not sure if Volume 2 collected the even pairings of this, or if there's going to be a Volume 4 that's going to collect those even numbers, but I do believe 25 was Rucka's last issue on the book. This will be interesting. I'll have to research more into this, but if you've been reading Wonder Woman in trade, this is definitely worth picking up. I can pretty much attest to Rucka is a quality writer, and from what little I've seen of Liam Sharp's art, his stuff is incredible too. And it looks like it is going for $16.99, the standard DC Rebirth trade price, and generally speaking, that's worth taking a chance on. Now for some independents. This one's going to be a little interesting. I almost wasn't going to include this one, but the premise just kind of grabbed me. It is Red Sonia issue 8 from Dynamite Comics, written by Amy Chu, with art by Carlos Gomez. I'm generally not much of a fantasy person, and I'm sure I'll have plenty of time to talk about why in other videos. But Sonia, oddly enough, because of Gail Simone, is one of those exceptions, and when I heard the premise for Amy Chu's run on Red Sonia, it's one of those crazy out there ideas that I almost have to check out for myself. It's basically Red Sonia in modern day New York, and apparently as of issue 8, she's going on a road trip to try and get back to her homeland of... I'm not sure if I've ever heard the pronunciation of for her homeland. Hyrcania? Let's go with that. Anyway, I picked up the first trade for this, so at some point I'll read and review it, but I figured I'd spotlight issue 8 in particular since it's coming out, and it is a really out there premise. It's definitely worth checking out if, you kind of like the idea of fantasy and modern day having a bit of a clash. Another independent series, and we're moving on to Image Comics, is Snowfall, the trade paperback. I'm not sure if there's going to be other volumes, so this might be just a complete story here. Written by Joe Harris, and with art by Martin Morazzo. And the basic premise from what I'm seeing is, looks like it is set in the year 2045, and it looks to be kind of a dystopian type of story where weather is used as a weapon. Looks like by a potential outlaw type of character who goes by the name The White Wizard. Got to give the creative team credit there. That's a premise I haven't really heard before, and it sounds just kind of out there and crazy enough to make for an interesting comic. This trade collects Snowfall issues 1 through 9 and is retailing for $19.99, which is another steal from Image. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, it looks like it's there for a fair price for you. Now I get to talk about the Catalyst Prime line again from Lionforge, which, as it's become apparent already, I am a big fan of this line. And it looks like it's going to be the Incidentals issue 1, written by Joe Casey and art by Larry Stroman. And the basic premise looks like a group of people with abilities have been gathered to conduct a series of secret missions on behalf of a billionaire. And it looks like it's going to be revealing potentially, I guess, a bunch of secrets regarding the universe. I guess so far, since the Catalyst Prime universe is still relatively young and forming as it goes along. Premise aside, like I know it's just kind of like a superhero team, sort of nothing like really breaking the mold, but it's Joe Casey we're talking about here. This is a guy who is able to play with superhero tropes and make them fresh in all kinds of different ways you wouldn't expect. So even if that doesn't sound like the most innovative thing around, this is Joe Casey. I would honestly recommend trying out some of this, especially from him, because I still believe he is one of the most underrated writers in comics today. So it's going for $3.99, and believe me, it'll be worth it. Now over to Marvel. I actually have two things to discuss about with Marvel for this show. And, you know, it feels like I probably haven't talked about Marvel much on this show at all, and I feel kind of bad about that, but like I said, I never want to force like a token pick onto there. Sometimes DC's not going to have everything, sometimes Image won't have something. You know, it always depends on the solicitations for the week, and this time I just happen to have two. So, the New Avengers Complete Collection by Brian Michael Bendis, Volume 7 is out. Looks like this appears to be collecting the... If it isn't the tail end of his run, it's really close, like maybe one trade away. But this is collecting the Avengers vs. X-Men tie-ins, the final confrontation with the Dark Avengers, and it looks like something also to do with Doctor Strange. I think this is the last bit of Bendis' run. This kind of sounds like it's about right. And this is going to be collecting New Avengers 16.1 and 17 through 34, going for $40, which, personal opinion, I mean, it's going to be a big trade. That will be. It's a little steep, in my opinion. Maybe find it around 30, 35, and that would be a really good deal. But 40, it's just a little steep for me. But either way, if you've been collecting the Bendis run up to this point, this looks to be the last bit of it, so there you go. And finally, this one's going to be a little odd given some of the controversy surrounding it, but I'm still going to recommend it, is X-Men Gold Volume 1, Back to Basics, from Mark Guggenheim, Ardian Syaf, and some other artists. I believe, I'm not sure if Ken Lashley comes into this trade, or maybe he'll be in the next one, but this is the X-Men post the X-Men vs. Inhumans crossover, and this seems to be, like it says in the title, Back to Basics, just kind of going to telling some more traditional X-Men stories. Looks like Kitty Pryde's going to be leading the X-Men. Seems to have a pretty interesting team as far as the X-Men teams go. And, you know, usually X-Men is relatively impenetrable, and nowadays it does seem a little easier to get into it. The basics of it is like X-Men Gold and Blue, so you have two different teams and two different creators, so it should be a little easier, hypothetically, to break into X-Men. And this one's collecting X-Men Gold issues 1 through 6 with the, I'd imagine, edited out background art that led to issue 1 being such a controversy. I'm going to give props to Marvel. This one is actually a really good deal. It is X-Men Gold issues 1 through 6 going for $15.99. I gotta give Marvel credit there. Credit where credit's due. That is a nice deal for that. So if you're looking to jump into X-Men or jump back into X-Men, maybe this will be for you. If not, I'm sure there'll be something else coming out, hopefully. I think like there's going to be a Cable series and Iceman and X-Men Blue and... oh yeah, Jean Grey. Forgot about that too. Odds are there's probably going to be something there for you, you know, if this doesn't quite do it. So, yep, that is the show for today, and feel free, as always, to like the video and share it if you enjoyed it. And also, feel free to comment with your haul if you picked up anything on Wednesday. Also, feel free to leave any general thoughts down below. And thank you once again for your time, and I will see you next week.